Hey y'all, this video is going to run through some of the basics of the different types of tissues. Okay, so I'm not going to go into exactly every single type. I'm just going to be talking about the broad categories. So the first kind of tissue that we're going to talk about are the epithelial tissues. Their locations include body coverings like the skin, body linings. So anything like lining certain areas. So like you hear stomach lining, that's epithelial tissue. And then any type of glandular tissue. So tissues that have lots of glands in them, they're going to be housed in epithelial tissues. So they serve a couple of different functions, and these functions are very specific to epithelial tissues, and that's protection. So again, if you think about the skin, it's protecting us from any kind of outside toxins, pollen, uh, bacteria, viruses, stuff like that. It's also going to be our epithelial tissues are also involved in absorption, so like absorption of nutrients, thinking about like in the stomach or in the intestines, there's a lot of epithelial tissue that is going to absorb nutrients. Epithelial tissues also serve as a kind of filtration area. So if you think about like the nose, we've got a lot of filtration that happens in there. There's a lot of epithelial tissues. Same thing with the mouth. There's going to be lots of epithelial tissues in there that are for filtration. And then also secretion. So any type of tissues that are involved with secretion. So again, our mouth, we secrete saliva. The skin, epithelial tissues in the skin secrete sweat. You've got the epithelial tissue in the stomach secreting stomach acid. So a whole bunch of epithelial tissues are going to be involved with the secretion of different things. Other hallmarks of epithelial tissues is that they cover and line body surfaces. So again, the skin. And then they have sheets. You think about like a sheet here. They have one free surface. So this surface that could be open to the air, like our skin, or open to fluids. So like the inside of the stomach cavity or the inside of the intestinal cavity. And then there is the other side. And so the other side is actually going to be anchored, and it's called the basement membrane. And it's generally anchored to some other type of tissue, like generally connective tissue. Okay. And then they're avascular, there's no blood supply to them, and they regenerate easily if well nourished. So this next slide has a picture of all these different types of epithelial tissues. You've got simple squamous, stratified squamous, simple cuboidal, simple columnar, and then pseudostratified and all those other stratifieds. So pause this if you'd like to look at it more. I'm going to keep moving on. So then we have our connective tissues. And connective tissues, like in the name, are found everywhere in the body to connect body parts. So connecting that epithelial tissue to something else, or connecting muscles to bones. So I know you've heard the term ligaments and tendons. Those are made of connective tissues. They are the most abundant and widely distributed tissues. There's connective tissues everywhere in your body. There's a connective tissue that actually keeps your intestines in place, and to make sure that your intestines don't get twisted, because that would be a huge problem. So their functions include protection, support, and binding. So they're actually going to help kind of protect the organs by keeping them cushioned and keeping them in place. Again, helping support them by making sure everything's in place. And then they're going to bind. They're going to bind things together again, like that. Your intestines are going to bind them together into a certain shape to make sure everything runs smoothly in there. So there is a variation in blood supply with your connective tissues. Some tissue types are vascularized. Some of them don't have a blood supply or are avascular, or they're poor blood supply. And then there's always an extracellular matrix that goes along with your connective tissues. So it's going to be this non-living material that surrounds living cells. So it could be some kind of ground substance, mostly water, with some adhesion proteins and polysaccharide molecules. And then there's fibers as well. One of our connective tissues that has a solid extracellular matrix is actually your bones. Your bones are actually considered connective tissue. and they have this ground matrix, or this solid ground matrix, of where they have this solid covering. That's pretty cool. And so then again, here's some different connective tissues: hyaline cartilage, fibrocartilage, elastic cartilage. And then there's a whole bunch more. So then for these muscle tissue types, or excuse me, the next type of tissue is muscle tissue. And the function is to contract, shorten, or to produce some kind of movement. You know about our skeletal muscle tissue. That's what you find in your biceps, your abs, everything that you have conscious control of. That's going to be made up of muscle. Your muscles are made up of skeletal muscle tissue. There's also cardiac muscle, which is found in the heart. And then smooth muscle is where there is involuntary contractions involved. So again, your stomach contracting to help digest food. Same thing with the intestines, your bladder contracting, also your kidneys, and then of course, the uterus during menstruation, all kinds of smooth muscle tissues helping out with that. Last tissue to talk about is the nervous tissue. So its function is to receive and conduct electrochemical impulses to and from the body parts. So you've got those receptor neurons, you've got the effector neurons, and you've got, your central nervous system, the brain and the spine, all made up of this nervous tissue. And the whole idea is irritability, so receiving signals or sending out signals, and conductivity, which is the ability to produce electrical signals. Your nervous tissue is composed of neurons and nerve support cells, and those support cells are actually called neuroglia, and their function or purpose is to insulate, protect, and support neurons. And so here's that final picture there. This right here would be that neuron. It's got axons and terminals, and then you can see the support cells here kind of surrounding it.